These are the 5 most common mistakes I notice in CSGO when either watching demos or simply spectating people and face it pugs. Before we start, however, I would like to just take a second to ask if you would please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are currently about 400 subscribers away from that 5k mark, so that would be an amazing goal to achieve. Let's not waste any more time here and get straight into the top 5 most common mistakes in CSGO. The first one on my list is going to be bad crosshair placement. And this is without a doubt one of the most important ones on this list here, being a lot more noticeable at a lower level as players haven't really perfected this of yet. The first part of this is obviously having it at the correct height, so when an enemy moves into your screen or when you peek an enemy, your crosshair is at the correct place so you can just simply left click and get the easy headshot. This is also linked heavily with pre-aiming and knowing where you should be aiming on each angle before peeking it. This can be fixed through using workshop maps and also pre-aim tools that can support you with this development. The other part of bad crosshair placement, guys, will be holding angles incorrectly and also having your crosshair too close to the corner. Instead of having your crosshair basically right on the corner when you're holding an angle, you want to leave a little gap where the enemy will swing out and take a duel onto you. This definitely applies more on when you're closer to an angle, however, still try to leave more of a gap when you're sitting at a longer range as well. If you're going to be pushing a position as a T here, you want to be pre-aiming all the positions you think the enemy can be, so when you peek you can just simply shoot. On the CT side it is very similar, but it is very dependent on the map that you're in currently, but the best advice I can give you here is that you use workshop maps and even watch pro demos to see where they're holding angles themselves and where this crosshair is placed so you know what to be doing for yourself. Now this next common mistake on the list is going to be moving incorrectly or just using that W key more than you should be. Now what I mean by this is mainly towards peeking. I see some players who instead of just using one key to peek an angle, using the A or D key for example, they're using something like both A and W at the same time, making them move diagonally round a corner. Now this makes it much harder for you to counter strafe correctly, because if you don't know how to counter strafe already and how it works, I did make a video on it if you want to check that out after this. But essentially you'll be having to counter these with 2 keys being W and A, with the opposite keys being S and D, making it much harder for you to keep this angle and also make sure your counter strafing is correct at the same time. Now not only it does have the fact that it does make it harder for you to counter strafe, but this actually makes it much harder for you to be hit by the enemy team at the same time, in where you get Ferrari peeked by someone. This is when someone just used one key and they swing out and it basically looks like they never stopped on your screen. However, if you're moving forwards around a corner, it makes it much easier for you to be hit by the enemy team if you would run out and forwards at the same time instead of just simply moving outwards. The best way I would suggest correcting this behavior, if you've noticed in your own gameplay you are doing this in a frequent basis, so I'm making it a point in pugs or whatever you're doing at the time to peek angles with only one key. Make sure you get into that habit at an early stage. Now this next point we're going to be talking about next, I would say is much more common in pugs than it is in Team CS. And this is not using your advantage correctly or even not noticing you have one in the first place. There is a basic rule of thumb that you can apply a lot of the time in each of your games when you get an advantage in an area of the map. And what I mean by an advantage, I mean you have lots of information of the enemy setup in this area, or you even find an entry kill. You should be applying more pressure in this area of the map following it. Now this is very situational of course, because if the enemy team already knows lots of you are coming in this area of the map, you could most likely be going into a stack where the rotated players have came in from. So I'll give you an example here on B-Apps or Mirage. If you're lurking in this position and it is fairly early on in the round, and for example you catch the enemy jump spotting and get an entry kill, what should you do next? Well, you should immediately push this area of the map and apply as much pressure as you can onto that short player, because at an early stage in the round that short player will most likely be far up towards short, helping his team contest for mid control, meaning you'll be able to run all the way up and catch this short player off guard if you do it fast enough. And again, after getting that kill, you can either accelerate even more and push towards market, making sure to keep this pressure on further and further and taking the map control you need. Next up is going to be playing too scared. Now what do I exactly mean by this? Well, I mean in situations where you're in actual fear of giving away a kill to the enemy team and dying to them. This will prevent you going for plays and trying to make impact. If you feel you should go for a play, then just do it. Don't overthink it and be scared to do something else because you might go down instead of getting the kill. You need to have the mentality that you are better than the enemy team, and you need to show that with confidence in the way that what you're doing around the map. I don't mean this in an arrogant way of thinking obviously you're simple or whatever, but have that confidence while you're peeking. Even if you do things halfway, it won't really work. If you do the wrong play sometimes and fully commit to it and have the confidence to do it, it still can work out in your favor. Not saying you should make a habit of doing the misplay and then full committing off of it as well, but I'm just simply saying don't be afraid to go for plays. This way you can really push the limits of yourself, and that way you can figure out what is better for you and an understanding of how you should approach the game. And finally, the last point I'll be going over for my opinion on the 5 most common mistakes in CS will be using too much utility when you should just be taking a fight instead. This can be in many different scenarios, however, mainly in later round situations like 2v2s, 2v1s for example, and even 1v1s. If you're in a 2v2, instead of flashing your teammate in, you should both probably just go in dry with guns and try trade each other out and take the fight instead. Utility is good, don't get me wrong, but there are definitely situations that players keep pulling out utility or using utility when instead they should just be simply shooting the enemy in the head and winning the round. Anyway, I hope this video has helped you out guys. It's been Glaze and I'll speak to you very soon.